The Moselle River runs cold and gray under a heavy morning mist. In a forward command post, maps are pinned to damp wooden tables. A colonel stands with his feet planted. He stares at a captain who holds no rifle, only a clipboard. The colonel points a finger at the mud. He says he will not move. He says his men died for this dirt. He calls the plan a circus act. He calls the equipment rubber toys. He refuses to budge for a phantom army. But George S. Patton is already on his way. The general carries a set of binoculars and a harsh lesson in reality. Before the sun clears the ridge, the colonel will see the world through a different lens. He will learn exactly what a toy is worth. This is the story of a high-stakes deception on the banks of the Moselle and the commander who nearly ruined it. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show the truth behind the myths of military glory. These are the moments where ego met the cold reality of modern war. Here, thousands of lives hung in the balance of a single stubborn decision. Samuel Levin was 27. He was from Brooklyn, New York. Before the war, he worked in a different kind of theater. He was a set designer at Paramount Studios. He understood light. He understood shadows. He knew how to make painted plywood look like a palace. Now he was a captain in the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. His canvas was the French countryside. His tools were air compressors and heavy-duty rubber. He spent weeks painting fake Sherman tanks. He used oils and brushes to mimic the look of grease on a sprocket. He painted false rust on the rivets. At 50 feet, they looked like steel. From 500 feet, they looked like an armored division. He had seen the cost of real war. He had seen the burnt husks of actual tanks. He knew that every German shell fired at a bag of air was a shell that missed a real soldier. He stood in the command post and felt the weight of 3,000 lives on his clipboard. He needed Birch to move. Raymond Birch was 46. He was West Point, class of 1920. He was a career infantry officer from Fort Benning. He smelled of tobacco and damp wool. He had commanded his regiment since the first day on the Normandy beaches. Since then, he had lost 340 men. Names were not numbers to him. He kept a handwritten list of every one of them in his desk drawer. Next to it was a framed unit citation. He believed in metal. He believed in heavy artillery. He looked at Levin and saw a boy playing with balloons. Birch considered the forward position a sacred ground earned with blood. He believed withdrawing his troops for a group of artists dishonored the men he had buried. He called the 23rd a troop of clowns. He called their equipment rubber toys for children. He possessed the unearned privilege of a man who thought his grief gave him the right to ignore a secret order. He refused to let the Ghost Army take his line. September 1944 was a month of friction and mud. The Great Crusade had stalled. The dash across France had ended at the banks of the Moselle. Supplies were low, fuel was scarce. The German army was not defeated. They were digging in. They were moving panzers into the woods. Every mile of front line was a gamble. The Americans were stretched thin. They needed a way to hold the line with ghosts while the real steel moved south. This was the era of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. It was a secret unit. It was a unit of painters, sound engineers, and radio experts. Their job was to lie. They used massive speakers to play the sound of moving treads. They used fake radio traffic to mimic entire divisions. They used inflatable tanks to draw enemy fire. Most high-ranking officers looked the other way. They saw the value in a distraction. They let the artists work because it saved their own men. But some colonels were built from older clay. They lived in a world of bayonets and direct fire. To them, the Ghost Army was a joke. It was an insult to the profession of arms. They saw the advance slowing, and they tightened their grip on the ground they held. They refused to believe that a balloon could do the work of a battalion. They saw the rubber and the paint, and they saw weakness. In the command post near the river, the tension was thick. The maps showed a gap. The Germans were looking for that gap. Birch held the ground, but he was holding it with tired men and empty shells. Levin stood ready to replace them with a clever lie. The colonel looked at the captain and saw a fraud. The captain looked at the colonel and saw a disaster waiting to happen. The argument in the command post reached its breaking point. Captain Levin walked into the command post. It was a basement in a ruined farmhouse. Rain dripped through the floorboards above. Colonel Birch sat at a heavy oak table. He was cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife. He did not look up when the captain entered. Levin placed the folder on the table. "Colonel," The movement orders are finalized, Levin said. I saw them, Birch said. We need your regiment to pull back 2 miles, Levin said. I am not moving, Birch said. The 23rd must be in position by dusk, Levin said. I don't care about your schedule, Birch said. Sir, this comes from General Patton's staff, Levin said. Patton isn't in this basement, Birch said. We have 400 inflatable units ready to deploy, Levin said. Rubber toys, Birch said. They work, Colonel, Levin said. They are circus tricks for children, Birch said. The German aerial photos won't know the difference, Levin said. A German sergeant with a rifle will know the difference, Birch said. We use sound trucks to mask the deployment, Levin said. I have lost 340 men since June, Birch said. I know the cost, sir, Levin said. You know nothing but paint and plywood, Birch said. My men bled for this ridge, Birch said. They died to take it from the 17th SS, Birch said. I will not abandon their sacrifice for a goddamn magic act, Birch said. The deception will save the 3,000 men in the real crossing, Levin said. If they are soldiers, they will fight for the crossing, Birch said. I am a career infantry officer, Birch said. I do not take orders from a set designer from Brooklyn, Birch said. This is a legitimate tactical operation, Levin said. This is an insult to the uniform, Birch said. I am not a stage manager, Birch said. I will not turn my front line into a playground for artists, Birch said. Tell the general I am staying put, Birch said. Is that your final word, sir? Levin asked. Get out of my sight, Birch said. Levin stepped back. He looked at the list of the dead on the colonel's desk. He saw the stubborn set of the older man's jaw. There was no room for reason. There was only the weight of the past. Levin turned and walked out into the mud. He climbed into his jeep. He told the driver to head for the division signal tent. He sent the message in the clear. He knew who would read it. The report reached Patton within the hour. The jeep arrived at the farmhouse, just as the first gray light hit the mud. Patton stepped out. He was in full uniform, 4 stars on his helmet, his ivory-handled revolvers buckled tight. He did not say a word as he walked into the basement. Every officer in the room stopped breathing. Birch stood by his desk, rigid. Colonel Birch, do you find the movement orders from my headquarters to be optional? Patton asked. No, General, Birch said. Do you believe the German intelligence officers have better eyes than my own aerial scouts? Patton asked. I believe those inflatable tanks are an embarrassment to the infantry, sir, Birch said. And you decided that your personal embarrassment was worth the lives of 3,000 men? Patton asked. I decided to protect the honor of my regiment, Birch said. Patton looked at the list of the dead pinned to the desk. He didn't blink. You think you are the only commander in France who has buried his friends, Patton said. You think those names grant you the right to be a martyr at the expense of an entire division. You are wrong. They are not a shield for your ego. They are a reminder of your duty to the living. Captain Levin has spent his war learning the art of the lie. He uses paint and air to create an army out of thin air. It is not a circus. It is a tactical necessity. The Germans will see a mountain of steel where there is only rubber. They will move their panzers to meet a ghost. You call his equipment toys. I call them a bargain. A rubber tank costs $20 and a few minutes of breath. A real tank cost $50,000 and 5 American lives. Every German shell that hits one of the captain's balloons is a shell that will never hit your men. You worry about the honor of the dead. The dead are gone. My responsibility is to the men who are still warm. The 3,000 soldiers who must cross that river deserve every advantage I can give them. They deserve a commander who is smart enough to use a shadow to win a fight. Now, you have a choice. You will withdraw your regiment to the secondary line immediately. You will assist the 23rd in their deployment with every man you have, or you will hand over your pistol right now. You will spend the remainder of this war in a rear area depot, counting real rubber tires for trucks. Pick one. You have 10 seconds to decide if you want to be a soldier or a clerk. Patton stared. He did not look away. Birch looked at the floor. His hands were clenched. I will withdraw the regiment, sir, Birch said. See that you do, Patton said. Patton drove Birch to a high ridge at dawn. The morning light was pale and sharp. He handed the colonel a pair of heavy binoculars and pointed toward the valley floor. 800 yards away, an entire armored division sat in the mist. Birch adjusted the focus of the glass. He saw the olive-drab hulls of 400 tanks. He saw the white stars on the turrets, and the heavy tracks pressed deep into the mud. The low, rhythmic throb of engines rose from the meadow like a physical weight. Radio traffic crackled in a nearby signal truck, filling the air with the frantic noise of 1,000 orders. Birch scanned the line. He looked for a seam. He looked for a wobble in the wind. He saw only a wall of American steel. He could not tell them apart from the real things. He could not find a single flaw in the captain's theater. Patton told the colonel that those rubber toys were about to save more of his men than his pride ever would. Birch lowered the glass. He finally gave the order to pull back. His regiment slipped away. The German panzers turned their guns toward the Ghosts. The real assault crossed the Moselle unopposed. Samuel Levin returned to Brooklyn in late 1945. He went back to the theater and the movie sets of New York. For 50 years, he never told his family about the rubber tanks or the painted trucks. He was sworn to secrecy by the Department of the Army. He lived a long and quiet life, dying in 2011 at the age of 94. Only in his final years did he speak of the war. He kept a small, jagged piece of olive-drab rubber in his desk for the rest of his life. He called it a piece of a miracle. Colonel Raymond Birch retired from the Army in 1952. He moved to a small farm near Fort Benning and stayed away from the limelight. He remained a man of lists and rigid schedules. When the story of the Ghost Army was finally declassified in 1996, he was still alive to read the full account. He sat in his study and looked at the names of the men who had survived that September morning because of a deception. He never spoke to the press. He died in 1998, leaving his handwritten lists and his unit citation to the Regimental Museum. General Patton never made a public record of the confrontation. He kept the report in a locked file among his personal papers. He mentioned the incident only once in a letter to his wife. He wrote that the hardest part of command was teaching old soldiers that a new trick could save 1,000 lives. He believed that the imagination of a set designer had done more for the Moselle crossing than 100 heavy guns. Some historians argue that relying on inflatable decoys was a reckless gamble that risked the lives of the infantry. They claim that if the German commanders had seen through the fake army, the resulting gap in the line would have led to a disaster. Others argue that the Ghost Army was one of the most successful tactical tools of the war. They point to the thousands of lives saved by diverting panzer divisions away from the actual points of attack. What is certain is that the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops conducted over 20 successful operations. Their illusions at the Moselle ensured the real crossing was a victory instead of a defeat. If you had been in Patton's position, would you have forced the colonel to see the value of a Ghost Army, or would you have respected his infantry tradition? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about the truth behind the myths of military glory, make sure to subscribe.